Instinctively, Trump has already launched a war against the BRICS. This is something that many of us had been saying even before the inauguration. There's going to be a war against BRICS in 2025. Yes, and that's it. Now it's on. So now it's up to BRICS and other multilateral organizations working closely to BRICS to devise their, I would say, more streamlined game planning on parallel systems and alternative payment systems, and more getting totally into payment settlements in their own currencies, intra BRICS and BRICS with the outsiders in the global majority. So this is the big geoeconomic game during the Trump presidency and beyond. And obviously, Trump would never frame it this way, because only analysts who understand how the empire works, they frame it this way. The empire is a completely different operation because it's an empire of plunder, and based on what Michael has described in detail as FIRE, financialization forever on everything, and inbuilt in that marketization of everything, including the way they want to marketize artificial intelligence. And then the Chinese with DeepSeek and with others that will be coming, they broke completely this business model in these past few days. The insurance industry all over the world is basically controlled by Atlanticist interests and real estate speculation. So this is the basis of the empire of plunder is FIRE, as defined by Michael. So if you don't try to dismantle FIRE and dismantle the foreign debt forever, it's impossible for the global South, BRICS or no BRICS, to keep developing. So this is the absolute key point. Absolute key point. If you don't solve this problem, you don't solve the problem of development of a great deal of the global South. Obviously, from an American point of view, this is what they want this to keep going, because this is how they exploit essentially the rest of the world. When they don't go straight for plunder and destroying nations or bombing nations into democracy, this is how they do it. It's a financial op. It's basically interest over interest on this eternal foreign debt. And the most important point is that this war is intrinsically related to what Michael says is the main problem, which is foreign debt in US dollars. Most of the global South, their foreign debt to IMF, World Bank, international financial system, loan sharks, the usual suspects, right, is in US dollars. It's essentially unpayable. Or if you pay what you owe to these loan sharks, you'll never develop as a sovereign nation. If there is not a solution, or if the global South as a whole does not decide to, we're not going to pay this foreign debt anymore, because they're paying interest over interest over interest over interest. So in the end, they'll spend their several lifetimes paying the debt. But what's inside is very serious, because these are the three challenges for Trump 2.0. The tech war against China, which now they are looking around and said, oh, we thought we had won that. No, there's a long way ahead. These are the first stages of the artificial intelligence war, for instance. We are in round one. The second one is what Michael Hudson details, and Trump just confirmed the war against the BRICS, which is the war against the global majority. And the third point is Ukraine, which we're going to be talking about, of course. How Trump is trying to position himself to bombastically announce something about Ukraine, which probably won't have anything to do with real life and what's actually happening live in the battlefields in Novorossiya, not to mention what the Russians want out of the whole thing. And based on paradigms that have proven themselves to be failing all across the spectrum. The Iron Dome in Israel is a joke. The Houthis prove that it's a joke. The Iranians prove that it's a joke. And he wants to do an Iron Dome in the US. It will be the equivalent of an F-35 program multiplied by 10. Look at the F-35. We don't need to say anything about it. Now they crash spontaneously. Probably there's a Zeus, a Thunderbolt. By the way, another sneak. Same thing with the Chinese AI models. Everything was planned, and everything is the fruit of deep research. It's not blah, blah, blah for Wall Street shareholders. But in terms of the tech war against China, we are on round one of a total tech war, no questions. And the disparity of funds is gigantic. Silicon Valley and American investors on one side with hundreds of billions of dollars. The Chinese are doing this on the cheap, but with their intellectual firepower and a lot of planning ahead very well, like Huawei was always planning ahead. I visited the Huawei lab in Shenzhen nearly 10 years ago, Nima. I was there in 2016. It was almost 10 years ago. Lots of the stuff that you see around, they were already testing it in Shenzhen in 2000. This is how you do it, and the concentration of intellectual firepower in that campus in Shenzhen was already extraordinary. Now they expanded the campuses. Even Huawei is like the center of an industrial tech matrix in China. There's a guy who published an outstanding map, and the diagram is fascinating because everything is integrated: drones, autonomous vehicles, artificial intelligence, semiconductors, smartphones, humanoid robots, industrial robots, electric vehicles, batteries, etc. And you have all the companies that are doing this. So then you have interlinked body, and at the center, Huawei, of course. But you have DJI, the largest manufacturer of drones in the world, BYD, electric vehicles, SMIC semiconductors, Oppo. They started with phones, and now they're going all over the place. Alibaba, ByteDance, Tencent, Chery cars. So the Chinese, with a fraction of that tsunami of dollars that the Americans have, they created their own tech industrial ecosystem. It's like if it was a metaphor for the multinodal world, which is the best definition of what we're aiming at, much better than multipolar. All those kids and all these guys who are working on DeepSeek, they graduated on the top Chinese universities. Not that they were important from Yale or any Ivy League. No, indigenous, local. So this is how you do it. And obviously, in terms of the vision, the overall vision for Chinese tech, we can say it's people-centered, applying one of their metaphors. Very, very, Xi Jinping is very fond of these metaphors. It is people-centered. It's not stock exchange centered. And that's all the difference. That's all you need to know. So this is part of what the Chinese had planned way before Trump 1.0, their program Made in China 2025, which even after Trump sanctions, they kept doing what they had planned without calling it Made in China 2025. Very Chinese. And that explains everything, including the DeepSeek breakthrough, which apparently, at least from the point of view of Silicon Valley and Wall Street, came out of nowhere. No, if you were following what the Chinese were doing, it came out of a very specific investment and technology center program, part of the Made in China 2025. If you see by item, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, solar panels, electric vehicles, etc. Everything was detailed by the Chinese already in the past decade, in detail, everything. Well, it's basically reintegrated the North American market and subordinating the North American market to the empire completely. You do the same our way or the highway. If you don't know what we want, we're going to slap sanctions on you ad infinitum. And the next in line is going to be the EU, probably in a matter of a few weeks after that, or maximum March, mid-March, etc. and then China. And then we're going to have the real deal, Nima. I'm sure our audience remembers the tsunami of Trump sanctions against China. The big ones, I think, starting 2018. He came to power early 2017, and the big tsunami came in 2018, especially on China's tech sector. Just look at the China tech sector now in 2025, where according to latest reports in the tech industry everywhere, China is ahead of the US in virtually everything. It's like a matter of more than 80% of all vital industrial and tech sectors. They created this multi-node ecosystem where all these industries are interlinked, talk to each other, and they are sharing their research progress. This is one of the reasons that explains what Huawei was doing and now and continues to do even under sanctions, and the DeepSeek phenomenon. It's not out of the blue. It requires a lot of planning, a lot of interlocked planning, and a central government that is more or less supervising all that and listening to these players, to their suggestions. If they need help, they'll get help. This is how it works. And based on paradigms that have proven themselves to be failing all across the spectrum. The Iron Dome in Israel is a joke. The Houthis proved that it's a joke. The Iranians proved that it's a joke. And he wants to do an Iron Dome in the US. It will be the equivalent of an F-35 program multiplied by 10. Look at the F-35. We don't need to say anything about it. Now they crash spontaneously. Probably there's a Zeus, a Thunderbolt. By the way, another sneak. Same thing with the Chinese AI models. Everything was planned, and everything is the fruit of deep research. It's not blah, blah, blah for Wall Street shareholders. First of all, they don't have a strategy, Nima, so they cannot change something they don't have. They have quarterly earnings, and they have speculation on Wall Street. Initial reactions to DeepSeek. We had two main reactions. American politicians, let's sanction the Chinese even more. Second reaction, coming from OpenAI, for instance. They copied our model, which is the equivalent of, who was the idiot who said that the Russians copied hypersonic? I'm sorry, the president of the United States himself. He said that the Americans copied the hypersonic designs from, the Russians copied the hypersonic designs from the US. So what does that tell you? First of all, that they're blind to what the rest of the world is doing, because it's a hubristic thing of all decaying empires. You know, you consider the rest of the world inferior to what you're doing, what you did, and how did you get to the top? Trump says, Trump in fact threatens OPEC and OPEC Plus. You have to lower the price of oil, otherwise, blah 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 blah. So OPEC Plus, they have a meeting and say, we're not going to do anything. It stays like it is. The price of oil at the moment is fine with us. We're going to cut production, which is something that we had already decided maybe in a month or two, and that's it. We're not going to change anything. So imperial diktats don't cut it anymore. Nobody even pays attention, and including Saudi Arabia, which is a Trump darling, which has already promised via MBS calling Trump saying, we're going to, invest $600 billion, which they don't even have that kind of money, in 4 years in the American economy, producing American jobs and all that. And Trump said, great, why not 1 trillion? Okay. So, it's a circus. It's an absolute circus. None of that has any meaning whatsoever. And MBS now, it's clever and experienced enough to hedge his bets with some actual promises, which nobody knows how he's going to fulfill. Some of them has zero sovereignty. Some, like the Emirates, because they have unlimited funds, they can play a little bit more. And Saudi Arabia, the same thing. And Qatar, of course, because Qatar punches way above their weight because of their Islamist connections everywhere. By the way, did you see the emir visiting the former head shopper, now president of Syria? It's what the Qataris wanted for 13 years, Nima, and they got it on a plate. Of course, not on a plate like that. They spent a little bit of money buying weapons for those people when they were still in Idlib. So now the emir is going to Syria to collect. So Qatar is, and Qatar, of course, Qatar, American bases in Qatar. Qatar is it's a very complicated story. It's fascinating to follow. They're very good at hedging their bets, but they are much more forceful compared to Saudi Arabia. And they don't disguise their Islamic leanings, connections, support, etc., including for head shop. But for the moment, he's managing Trump very, very well, very, very clever. And because he also knows that what Trump wants is the normalization of Saudi Arabia-Israeli relations. The Saudis already said, yes, as long as the Palestinian problem is solved, which we know we won't. So there will be no rapprochement Saudi Arabia-Israel, obviously. But the way MBS has been managing the whole thing is not bad. It's not bad. It's the best he can do at the moment, considering he is squeezed in the middle. Right? But that, in terms of appeasing the big hegemon, it works fine. Trump bought it right away, and Saudi Arabia still, they look at BRICS, they say, okay, wait a little bit, maybe later. That's what it's a fascinating hedging game at the moment. And of course, they're looking at China. Chinese say, look, one day we're going to buy all your energy in petrol you want. Get ready. And they know that. And the deadline is approaching. So MBS is in an inviolable position. He has to juggle all that. The number one, let's say, Qatari interest, which they had manifested since 2010, at least, or even before, is that famous gas pipeline, which will have to cut across Saudi Arabia as well before reaching Syria. So this means that the Saudis will have to approve this gas pipeline. That's not a done deal, far from it. But assuming that the Americans, for instance, would pressure Saudi Arabia to accept the Qatari pipeline, because this would be, from an European point of view, would be a very good deal. But from a Trump administration point of view, would not be a very good deal. Why? Because they want to keep selling American LNG at exorbitant prices to the Europeans, even though they don't have enough LNG to sell to Europeans because of their liquefaction capabilities, which are very restricted. And this explains why the Europeans are buying more Russian and LNG now than before, paying 3 or 4 times the price via all sorts of middlemen, because the Americans cannot export everything that the EU needs. So they wouldn't want competition from Qatar with this pipeline. So this pipeline is a very complicated thing to have. All these major pipelines, the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline. This story has been going on for 15 years at least. And still, maybe. So instead of having a Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline, we could have a Russia, Afghanistan, and Russia, Uzbekistan, for instance. Russia, Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan pipeline. India, same thing. Very complicated, long-term. It depends on India-Pakistan relations. But if one day this pipeline would be built, which we'll never know, this is one of the running pipeline sagas. I've been following this for 15 years. I love following this because it's immensely complicated, and we know that in the end, probably nothing's going to happen. But then the Russians Gazprom will be directly involved because they want to bring Afghanistan into the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Then the Russians can get all these on the table at the SCO and say, look, let's build a pipeline which is going to be good not only for us, for obvious reasons, Gazprom, but for you Afghans, for you Pakistanis, and for you Indians. And they might eventually agree. maybe, and now the maybe is fascinating because the Russians are getting into the picture. The Russians are trying to get Afghanistan in the bag, and in fact, they have already. This is something that I saw at the Vladivostok Forum last year, when there was an important Afghan delegation being paraded around by top Russian ministers and businessmen, etc. They're going to start selling gas to Afghanistan via convoys. The next step, would be building a pipeline.